This is Mike Long.
Hello, Mike. We'll get started here in just a moment.
Sir, I'm going to mute you on my end for right now.
Thank you.
Scott Johnson arriving.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You got Leonte here as well.
Hello, Leonte. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Lisa's here.
Hello, Lisa. And I saw Fenna. Is Martha on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Martha's
And
always here.
got it. Dr. DeJarnett, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you. Kenneth, are you on the line? Kenneth Mason?
He's having problems getting in. We're trying to get him in now.
Okay. I do see Mike Royal. Vice Chair Jason Downey, are you on the line? Okay, we're going to hold for a moment until we get Kenneth on the line. Helen, are you on the line? Helen Rice? Who just joined the call? All right, Helen, are you on the line? Unless can anybody see her? I can't see her on my screen. All right. Jerry, is somebody trying to connect with Helen to see if she's having any struggle getting into the meeting? I'm going to make sure that she has a link. I know she was having some Godot email. All right, I just sent Helen the link in case she's having any challenges getting in. I know, let's go ahead and take roll. I'm going to go down the list of the Board of Education members. So far, I have Scott Johnson present, Mike Royal present, Dr. Butch Mosley present, Matt Donaldson present, Mike Long present, Miss Fenna Petty present, Miss Lisa Kinnamore present, Miss Martha Zoller present, Mr. Leonte Benton present, and then Dr. Stan DeJarnett present, and then Scott Sweeney, the chairman, present as well. Are there any other members on the line?
Tracy Penley here.
Sure. Tracy, thank you very much.
Kenneth Mason is present.
Kenneth, thank you very much. Okay, we do have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. We have one agenda item before us, which is the adoption of a resolution. The adoption of the resolution was posted on Assembly, and it was also distributed to each and every member of the Board of Education. So at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve. This is Scott Johnson.
I have a motion. That is a first from Mr. Johnson. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Long.
Second, Mr. Long. Okay, at this time, we'll open it up for questions, comments, and discussion. And before I do, I want to actually make a couple of statements. Some of the messages that we've received have already intimated that this meeting here today is the adoption of a board rule. It is not the adoption of a board rule. This is the adoption of a resolution. And importantly, one of the things is that I also want to draw the distinction that the board has as far as its duties and responsibilities with regards to standards and local education authorities and the school districts with regard to curriculum. The State Board of Education does have the approval authority over standards, and we work very, very closely with the Georgia Department of Education, Superintendent Woods, and his staff with regards to adoption of standards and the approval of standards. Those go through a rigorous process, including open comment periods, multiple committees, and so forth. There is nothing before us today that is involved in the adoption or rejection of any standards. So that's important to know. Secondly, with regard to curriculum is the tools and the manner in which the standards are taught, largely speaking. And at the end of the day, the curriculum is determined by the local education authorities and individual schools throughout the state of Georgia as they best deliver the standards. And we know that as members of the Board of Education, but I want to make sure that the general public is keenly aware of that distinction as well. With regard to this resolution, I also want to make clear some very, very important things. I want to give credit to Helen Rice, and also Miss Lisa Kinnemore, and others within the State Board of Education who shared tremendous resources and information with us. And importantly, was very, very helpful as far as the drafting of the resolution. One thing the resolution does not do, the resolution does not, for example, create a situation where we are looking at individuals differently. At the end of the day, the resolution is something that we want to look at all individuals essentially the same. And then importantly, with regard to this, it does not mention critical race theory per se. Okay, this is not something that is going directly after critical race theory. What it is trying to do is draw the distinction between divisive ideologies and finding their way into standards. And this is really just kind of a foundational statement more so than anything else. With regard to divisiveness, for example, can you imagine any supremacist ideology making its way into standards? I cannot. All right? So this is agnostic with regard to, those types of divisiveness. Any divisiveness is really not something that should be integrated in within a standard. Now, I want to also be very, very clear. In this regard, it is important to know that the resolution and the adoption of the resolution, when we look at this, what we do want to do is make sure that we're not down the road including anything that is divisive in nature. The important distinction here is from curriculum standpoint, is curriculum, we want to encourage people to teach the facts. Is there racism within the country? Absolutely. All right. Is the entire country racist? I don't agree with that. As recently as just, within the past couple of months, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris said as much. They said the United States is not a racist country. And I believe that. I believe that it's not a racist country. Yet at the end of the day, we cannot allow divisiveness and divisive ideology to become standards in education. So I want to leave that at it is. As far as my comments are concerned, I would absolutely welcome anybody else's comments, questions, or concerns at this point in time. Anybody have anything they'd like to add?
Scott, this is Helen. Can you tell I'm in?
I can now, Helen. Thank you for joining. Helen, go ahead.
Well, obviously, I just got in on the last of what you were saying, but I think these are strong, but yet they are really trying to be fair to all. I think the diversity that we're recognizing a lot of differences here, but we're also trying to treat people like they would like to be treated and include people and make sure, as you said, that the teachers and our students are being able to teach content and facts. So I think it's a great start, and I appreciate everyone that works on these.
All right, I think somebody else wanted to weigh in.
I would like to.
Go ahead.
I'm a proud American. I'm a proud Georgian, born and raised. But knowing what I know, seeing what I've seen in my years in school myself, I went to 9 different schools in Georgia. I attended Furman University, where I was a sociology major, and went on to the University of Chicago, where I studied race and ethnicity and education in depth. I can't in good conscience support this resolution the way that it's currently written. And if the intent is to allow us to give our students multiple perspectives and multiple facts, then I absolutely agree with that. However, in some of the wording, it seems like teachers will be censored from talking about current events in the classroom, and that we will be censored from teaching different perspectives and the very problematic, past of our country. I think the same way that we cannot simply say that Georgia is racist, because I agree, we can't call the entire state racist. I think it's equally as problematic to categorically state that Georgia is not racist, right? For one, just for a few different reasons. For one, I think that this resolution could highlight a lack of informed decision-making on our part. We absolutely cannot ignore the extensive research in the field of the systemic barriers that exist in our country, within housing, within law enforcement, and yes, also in education. If you haven't yet read some of the very well-researched and highly regarded researchers in this field, I encourage you to. We should not make a decision without having read, for example, Dr. Bettina Love, We Want to More Than Survive. We can't ignore the facts to prevent. Similarly, my job is to represent teacher voices. And for one, I have not been in a single classroom or spoken to a single administrator or teacher who believes that our job is to brainwash students or to present one side. That's just not true. We present multiple sides. And every good teacher knows that real learning comes when students are constructing their own knowledge. And that means giving our students all of their resources, allowing them to tackle difficult conversations in the classroom, and that includes current events. I really worry that not being allowed to discuss current events could be damaging, not only to our future as a state, but also to our students' own identities. We simply cannot disregard the lived experiences of our students and our teachers. And I want us to trust teachers. This resolution feels like we're saying we don't trust our educators to do the right thing and to teach patriotism. And I don't think that's true. Furthermore, every single email that I have received, every single direct message, every comment on social media has been opposed to this resolution. I can further say that after traveling the state and speaking with our state's top leaders in education over the last 2 years, guess what the most important topic has been? Equity. When they reach out to me to speak, they want me to speak on equity. Even I presented for the Georgia Department of Education Summer Reading Institute last year, and they had me present on using culturally relevant pedagogy and practices of socio-emotional learning to teach novels. Furthermore, I think that we need to empower our students. Students of all backgrounds deserve to see the multiple and the difficult, problematic facets of our history. A very intelligent Caucasian high school student reached out to us, and in his email, he identified multiple cases of racism happening in his school. This past week, one of that school's teachers resigned because they were disciplined for not shutting down a child who wanted to talk about racism in the classroom. That's not right. We have to empower our students and build a better future. So, in sum, I absolutely am proud to be a Georgian, and no, I do not think that racism exists across the entire state, but to categorically say that and declare that we're not a racist state flies in the face of all of the research that I've been taught and that I look at. It flies in the experiences of our educators and of our students. And personally, I believe that making our classroom a space that's open to having these difficult conversations is the best way towards building compassionate students, strong citizens, and really preparing Georgia's future for the better.
Scott, can
Helen, hang on just a second. And I really, really appreciate your comments, Tracy. Thank you very much. I want to be very clear about something here, too. This resolution does not prohibit anybody from teaching anything. This is not a rule. Okay, this is not a rule. This is a resolution. This is a belief statement more so than anything else, or an affirmation. Now, one of the charges that we have here is, at the end of the day, potentially considering some kind of a rule down the line, which would involve work amongst all of the board members. And Tracy, your feedback as well to be included in that as an ex officio member of the board. I mean, we want and value your opinion. But I want to make it very clear that this resolution today doesn't put the brakes on anything that is already occurring in the classroom. Okay, and that's a really, really important distinction. And I know some people are looking at it in this vein. The most important thing and the work that we have before us is from this, we'll call this a foundation statement, what type of rule might we consider or rules might we consider in part, in whole, of any kind? And that's a discussion for us to have as we progress towards this, and it's very, very challenging, very, very difficult work.
Mr. Chairman, in order to make a statement of such a complex social construct that affects so many people, we should have a discussion before we make such a statement that is creating this binary opposition, this zero-sum game that if you believe and have experienced racism in your life, then you should and will be silenced. That's extremely disappointing to me in a state that has standards that say develop claims and counterclaims fairly, thoroughly, supplying the most relevant evidence for each while pointing out the strengths and limitations of both in a manner that anticipates the audience's knowledge level, the concerns, values, and possible biases. For those of you on the board that have reached out to me at different times and had a conversation about this, I want to thank you. But for similar reasons, and we talk. I've served on this board a long time, and we place value in teachers' experiences. And I want to thank the teacher on this board for pulling out what was in my heart and my head. And thank you for saying it. My disappointment with this resolution is not only didn't we discuss it, but the impact that it will have on achievement, on motivation. And Scott, you did speak about what our role is. Our role is governance. Our role is quality, execution of policy in conjunction with the Department of Education. The statement, when I read it, made me feel like I didn't belong, because it excused the existence of racism in my life, in my two children's life that you've met, and the millions of families that it affects. So I still hope, because I know you all, that although my vote will also be no to this, that this uncomfortable moment will create some fodder for conversation, real conversation. Thank you.
Kenneth, thank you very much.
Well said, Kenneth and Tracy. I mean, is there any way we could just have this thing modified and, again, have a conversation before we just release something that we don't collectively agree with?
Scott, can I just ask something again? Because I don't think anybody intended on making people feel like they're condemning teachers. I didn't see it when I read that members of one race cannot and should not attempt to treat others without respect. An individual's moral standing or worth is not necessarily determined by his or her race. I saw this as trying to pull together for teachers and students a way to say that, as I said, that diversity, we are respecting all the merits of difference in people and ideas. We are respecting equality. That means treating people like you'd like to be treated and not forcing, and inclusion. We're not excluding anyone. We made a whole statement. I saw that traits such as hard work and those kind of things. It was just something to put in their kid. It would never be anything that would be divisive. That I saw it was to help teachers and students understand that there's certain things that are not in our standards, and I don't think we're there to teach indoctrinations or anything. I think our teachers teach with facts, and that's what we're saying. Let's teach the content with facts. That's why clarity are added to standards. I just didn't see it that way, and I'm sorry if you did, because I respect you, and and Tracy, I respected what you said. I just saw it as a great way to come up with. We were asked to come up with some ideas, and I have seen this before where it said there was no condemnation to me. Teachers could still teach, and you could question, but you questioned in a way that it was thought-provoking, and it was a way that set America and us on our principles of what we stand for, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and all those things that are independent to each other and not separating race against race or people against people. So I'm sorry, I saw it in a different way. Maybe there's someone else that wants to speak up.
Hey, Scott, this is Lisa.
Lisa, just a moment. I want to get back to Leonte's question. Leonte, I mean, there's the answer to your question is yes. I mean, there's always an opportunity to, make modifications and changes that would be proposed as amendments or deletions of some kind, and that would be through an amendment process. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that tool as well. Ms. Kinnemore?
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. I, too, also do not think that this is a racist country. There has been issues and periods of discrimination in the past, and there will continue to be some in the present and possibly in the future. not just here, but around the world. What I do not want to happen is for stifling of children of not being able to critically think about complex issues that are going on in the state and in this country. There have been times where history was taught, but it wasn't fully taught. There are myriad sides to different historical issues that are going on in this country. Yes, slavery is taught, and I learned about slavery when I was in school, and I taught my kids that I taught when I was teaching about slavery. But also, slavery is not just something that happened with the people who were white to people who were black. Black people were actually slaves to black people, and it goes all the way back even to ancient times. Slavery in Egypt and Rome and all around the world. I just don't want everything to be relegated to teaching certain students, especially minority students, that they are and they will always be in a class of second-tier students, that they will always be victims. Victimization happens, but no one should be under the cloud of thinking that victimization is what they have to look forward to. It's just like Kenneth said, it stifles. It does stifle. It stifles the teacher from being able to teach across an entire myriad of issues, from positive to negative viewpoints. And it also stifles the child thinking that they will not be able to learn or they will not be able to aspire. Every person in this country is not a person of white heritage that is very, very wealthy. They are very, very wealthy, Black, Hispanic, Asian, Indian, Jews, all across this country. And we need to understand the history. And when they look at the standards and they see certain names mentioned as examples in the standard, that doesn't mean that a teacher is relegated only to those names that are mentioned in the examples. We have to step outside of that and look outside of everything that's going on in this country. There are good parts of this country and there are bad. And history needs to be taught not from one particular viewpoint, but from both sides, whether we like it or not. And I, my hat goes off to teachers across this state who work from sun up to sundown and even through the night, some of them doing things for our students to make sure that they have a quality education. And I want that to continue, but we also need to make sure that our kids are taught that anyone can learn. Education begins at the home, and it moves into the classroom all through society, and we need to continue to foster that learning ideology around our students, our children, in our homes, in our classrooms. And I just don't want critical race theory to be one-sided. If we're going to teach about anything about race, it needs to be from every viewpoint and every perspective, and not slanted from one side to the other.
Thank you, Ms. Kennemore. Does anybody have any further questions or comments?
Chairman Sweeney, I do. It's Mike Royal.
Thank you, Mike.
Kenneth, I appreciate your comments and respect the heck out of them and you in that perspective. And Leonte, I appreciate some of the stories you've shared with me in our after meeting dinners on some of the perspective you had. And Tracy, thanks for your perspective as a teacher. I mean, you all three of you have perspectives that I just don't have in life, and I'm trying to soak them in and listen to them. And Kenneth, as I shared with you, is when we were talking about this, one of my things I don't want to happen, and I was sharing with Chairman Sweeney before this, I think what part of what we need to talk about. And Tracy, I think maybe you hit on this a little bit, because with all due respect, some of the things you mentioned are very important, but they don't say that. They don't say that in this document. Actually, some of the stuff that's in there that you mentioned is addressed in this document, but it is addressed in that it shall not happen, not it will happen. But when you're reading it through the lens and reading between the lines, which I don't normally do, but I get that this is why, because your perspective does happen, we need to make sure that we don't send a message intentionally or unintentionally that culturally appropriate pedagogy that celebrates, identifies, and encourages the contribution to our country and our rich history of African Americans, Hispanics, whatever group, can't be taught or shouldn't be taught, and not even beyond that, shouldn't be celebrated in, Kenneth, your daughter's classrooms and any of that. It shouldn't do that. So, with that, I mean, because our genuine American history is rich of stories, achievements, and sacrifices, and of all peoples of all colors and all backgrounds that they've made. And I believe what we should be doing in the classroom is teaching a genuine history. Then we should be talking about and striving for excellence. And that's a common standard that challenges people of all backgrounds to achieve their God-given potential. We must teach the true story of American history and be honest, though, about our injustices in American history that have happened and continue to happen, but put it in the context of our nation's high ideals and the progress we've made towards realizing the true achievements, but also the work that still needs to be done. And in the four corners of this document, that's what I read. But I respect, Kenneth, and what you said, and Tracy, that the perception can be made otherwise. I mean, because Tracy, you mentioned some of the people that have reached out to you. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and had conversations with some people that I don't, I'm not going to mention, but truly respect, that have given me perceptions pro and con to this. But my contacts I've had have been overwhelmingly for needing to do something to protect that, what I was just talking about. America is great. We're the shining city on the hill. We have our issues, but we were given the opportunity by our founding fathers, and it's outlined in the Civil Rights Act, it's outlined in the Voting Rights Act, the 14th and 15th Amendments, to make change. Have we lived up to the potential of America? No. But are we the best country on earth because we're trying and we give people the opportunity to do it? Yes. And we will continue to do that. And this gets into, I think, whether it's critical race theory, whether it's, as Scott mentioned, whether it's whatever thing anybody's trying to infiltrate and indoctrinate, and that's not what teachers do. But I can tell you as a parent, some of it is starting to filter into high school. I'm not going to get into today some of the stuff that I've had conversations with my high school daughter and my daughter that just graduated from college, some of the conversations we've had. So that, to me, is what is in the four corners of this document. But I think, Scott, what we have to do moving forward, if we approve this today or whether we don't approve this today, we have to have serious discussions as a board on what we're going to do for that, because no child, no teacher should feel like they do not have the opportunity, because that's not critical race theory. Teaching culturally appropriate pedagogy that does that, that is not critical race. That is not, Mark, that is not anything. That's called history and teaching. And Kenneth, you laid out our standards, which I think are very appropriate, the paragraph you read in our standards. But that's what I think the four corners of this document try to do, is codify that standard right there, Kenneth, that you wrote. And I appreciate you, and if you vote against this, and I still love you like a brother, and I appreciate where you're coming from, but that's what I read in the four corners of this.
Thank you, Mr. Royal. Are there any other comments or questions at this point in time?
Scott, this is Stan. Can you hear me okay?
No, we can. Thank you, Stan.
I've struggled with this a lot, although I want to give a lot of credit to the people that did work on this, because I do agree that it's tried to walk a very, very difficult path. And I don't want anything that this board does to have a chilling effect on teacher autonomy in the classroom and their ability to interact with their students. And I certainly don't want to restrict their rights as individuals or as professionals. Nor do I want to see this have a chilling effect on the discussions that we need to be having in our classrooms with our children. My reading, I looked very, very carefully in this resolution, and I will agree that there might be some changes that could be made that won't affect the overall tone of the document, and I'd be open to some further discussion or deliberation about some minor revisions or some other revisions. But I want to be very clear about one thing, and that is I've spent my entire career supporting school and district efforts to promote inclusion and equity and celebrate diversity, because that's our state. And I don't want to be a part of any initiative that has a chilling effect on the efforts of school districts or schools to talk about inclusion and talk about equity. Now, I don't like being painted into a corner by other writers and other people, and I'm disappointed that those terms are being co-opted, I think, and misused by voices on both sides of this argument. But equity in a school setting, and inclusion in a school setting, and diversity in a school setting is important, and it's something we ought to make our business every day. And I want to make sure that whatever steps we take after this resolution, that we are very careful about that we're not painting ourselves into a corner, but we're also not painting students and teachers into a corner, because unfortunately these days we spend most of our time in our corners, and we need to bring people out of their corners and into the center of the arena and into the center of the classroom. And I want to support initiatives and resolutions that bring us together, not resolutions and initiatives that divide us. But I think that this document on the whole has dodged some of the issues, not dodged, but has been clear about not allowing open discussion in the classroom. And I want to make sure that we stay on that we're not restricting students. We can't lie to our students. We should not be lying to our students. And I want to make sure that our teachers have the opportunity to teach facts, as Helen said, to teach also ideas, and also to teach our children to think for themselves as they move through our school system. So I'm open to some other suggestions. I don't want to belabor the point, but I do appreciate, Scott, the leadership role you've taken in getting this document to the place that it is, and I thank you for that. And I'm open to any other comments that someone else might have.
Thank you very much, Dr. DeJarnett. Is there anybody else that would like to be heard? Mr. Johnson, Mr. Mosley, Mr. Donaldson, Mr. Long, or Ms. Zoller or Ms. Petty?
Mr. Chairman, Scott Johnson here. I've carefully read every word of this document and believe it affirms our teachers, not restricts them. It affirms them the right and the opportunity to teach fully and openly the truth, unvarnished, but not from a single point of view, but from a constructive point of view that allows us to allow teachers and to teach students from a perspective that allows for different viewpoints, but it doesn't restrict teachers to one viewpoint. And I know we all see this as through our own lens, and I can appreciate that. I appreciate everyone on this call and your perspective. I've tried, as we all hopefully do, to not look at it just from my lens, and just to say, if this were 1964, would I support this just as equally as I believe this resolution is a good resolution today? And I've come to the answer that I would, because things have changed in our country since 1964. But in that 50 years, we've come a long way, and we certainly are not a perfect country today. But if we were in the midst of the civil rights struggle, I believe this resolution would be just as appropriate. And I also want to make the point: this doesn't restrict teachers from teaching current events. If you read it, it restricts teachers from teaching current events from a single point of view, and that is what our educators should be doing. And I appreciate everyone on this call, your comments. I respect you all, and I know that we will work together today, and we will work together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Any other questions or comments from any other board members?
If I can add one note about the language in the very first resolution bullet, if that's okay?
Yes.
Hearing every one of you, I appreciate your voices so much, and I've heard each of you say, who have spoken, that our country is great, but that there are still problems, and we can all acknowledge that. The language in that very first one, we believes the United States of America is not a racist country, and that the state of Georgia is not a racist state. That first statement alone is what I think colors the interpretation of reading the rest of the document. If there is a simple language change that says something like, and the state of Georgia seeks to not be a racist state, right? I think that could really change the way the rest of the document is interpreted.
Scott,
thank you.
Martha's officer. I think how I read that line, and I read it many times, is that the law of the state of Georgia and the laws of the United States of America, the countries are not racist. Human beings are going to make mistakes every single day, and we as a board, or we as teachers, or business people like I am, there is no way that we're going to be able to control every single person's behavior. But the law of the state of Georgia and the law of the United States of America is not racist. And I think that, if Scott, I think, mentioned reading between the lines, you've got to read it for what it is and what it says. It doesn't say anything about how people respond to things. And you know what? If we could control people, we wouldn't be the great country that we are. So it takes that kind of individualism to be able to look at things. So I am not offended by that initial line, because I see it as saying the country, the law of the country, the law of the land of the state is not racist.
Thank you, Ms. Zeller. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Hearing none, the chair will now call for a vote on the resolution. I'm going to do
Sweeney, if we're done
yes.
with comments, there is Helen, I believe, a housekeeping or scrivener's error in it.
Yeah.
Actually, and Mike, I think I have those. As a matter of fact, number one, the line below where it says now therefore be it resolved that the word "we" should be stricken, and the word "the State Board of Education." So capital "the," that should be a change. And then further down in paragraph number 11, the reference number should be changed from 6 to 5 and from 11 to 10. And then in paragraph 13, the reference numbers there should be changed from 5 to 12. I'm sorry, from 6 to 5 and from 13 to 12. Is that correct, Mike?
That is correct. And then the only other thing that's not a scrivener's error, but I believe it was put in there, is in Section 5. In the second sentence, it says, where it says, for employee to adopt or believe any of the following concepts, I would make the here's what I'll make the motion to adopt, to change the resolution with your aforementioned thing, and also in line number 5, or section number 5, line number 2, to strike or believe, because I don't believe we can tell anybody what they can or can't believe, that it just says, or employee to adopt any of the following concepts, and strike to believe in that. That would be the only other changes, the only change other than the others that I would maybe ask to make.
Mr. Royal has proposed that as an amendment. So the amendment would be the adoption of the resolution with the following changes being the line before the now, therefore be it resolved that, where it says we, the state board, would be changed to the State Board of Education for the state of Georgia. The next item would be in paragraph 5, the second line, to strike the word or believe. The next change would be in paragraph 11. The number references there would be changed from 6 to 5, and then from 11 to 10.
Yeah.
And then in paragraph 13, the reference numbers would be changed from 6 to 5 and from 13 to 12.
Correct.
All right, so that is the motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, Scott Johnson, I second it.
All right, we'll take Mr. Johnson as a second. So I have Mr. Royal as a first on that amendment, and I have Mr. Johnson as a second. So we're voting on the changes to the resolution first. So all those in favor? Actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go through the roll. So Mr. Johnson?
Yeah.
Mr. Royal?
Yes.
Mr. Mason? Mr. Mason? Mr. Mosley? Kenneth, I'm sorry, was that a no?
Yes, but is there any discussion on this, or is that gone by?
Dr. Mosley, thank you for the housekeeping as our parliamentarian. My apologies for not entertaining the discussion. Yes, are there any questions or comments?
Well, this may be a little after the fact. I've tried to listen very carefully to the viewpoints of everybody. I'm sort of in lockstep with Dr. DeJarnett in his remarks, but I was wondering if there's any middle ground where those who are not in favor of this resolution that have spoke out that might come in the fold and make this a unanimous vote and send the message out that we are united in what we're trying to do and not divisive and create ill will among our members.
Okay, Dr. Mosley, let's do this first. Let's go ahead and, because I understand where you're coming from, this is only a motion to approve the changes right now. So once we make those changes, we'll still back out and have an opportunity because we're still in discussion.
That's fine.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments relative to the changes that have been proposed by Mr. Royal? Okay, hearing none. I have already called for the vote, and I have a yes for Mr. Johnson. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
I have a yes from Mr. Royal. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have a no from Mr. Mason. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. We'll continue with Dr. Mosley.
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Ms. Rice.
Yes.
Ms. Petty.
Yes.
Ms. Kinnamore.
Yes.
Ms. Zoller.
Yes.
Mr. Benton.
No.
Dr. DeJarnett.
Yes.
And the chair votes in the affirmative, yes. So that motion for the changes to the resolution does pass. And The vote is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 yeses and 2 noes. The noes being Mr. Mason and Mr. Benton. All right. We still have the main motion before us, which is the approval of the agenda. Dr. Mosley, I'm going to turn the comments back over to you.
Well, I've said what I wanted to say. If there's any middle ground or any additions or deletions that would bring Mr. My friend Leotis and Mr. Mason in the fold, I'd love to hear from them.
Does anybody have a response to Dr. Mosley? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Dr. Mosley, are there any other questions or comments you'd like to offer?
No,
I do have a comment. I'm sorry, I was muted.
All right, go ahead, Kenneth.
Yeah, Dr. Mosley, I do appreciate the extension of the olive branch. I think I disagree with the intent of the board creating a resolution in this manner because of the unintended damage it will do in classrooms and may move people to making decisions around conversations that impact students and teachers' lives irrelevant. There's a danger in some of the rhetoric that I'm open to discussing how we may change some of it, but in totality, the intent, I'm going to respectfully and wholesomely disagree with it. But thank you, Dr. Mosley, for trying to reach out.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Kenneth. All right, any other further questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, the chair will now call for a vote for the approval of the resolution, beginning with Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Royal.
Yes.
Mr. Mason.
No.
Dr. Mosley.
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Miss Rice.
Yes.
Miss Petty.
Yes.
Miss Kinnamore.
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller.
Yes.
Mr. Benson.
No.
Dr. Desjarnette.
Yes.
And the chair votes in the affirmative, yes. The motion carries. The vote is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 yeses and 2 noes. Okay, that concludes our meeting for today. Are there any final comments before we close out? All right, hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, Mr. Long.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Is there a second?
A second.
Is that Ms. Petty?
Ms. Zoller.
Thank you, Ms. Zoller. Okay, all those in favor of adjournment? Actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go through the roll again because we're on a video call. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Royal?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Yes.
Dr. Mosley?
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes, from Fort Carson, Colorado.
Thank you, sir. Miss Rice?
Yes.
Miss Petty?
Yes.
Miss Kinnamore?
Yes.
Miss Zoller?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Dr. Desjarnette?
Yes.
Sorry, Stan. And the chair votes in the affirmative as well. Thank you all for your time today. This meeting is adjourned.